We'll get started here in just a bit. We'll let a few other people get started. Hopefully you can see the first slide on the deck. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for attending. My name is Greg Aden. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in just a minute, but what I did want to start out by saying is why did I create this? It started from a lot of work with a lot of different clients around communication. And communication, as some of us know, is the cornerstone to developing relationships. So it wasn't just about conversations at the time. It was about how do we prepare to be better communicators? And then there were topics about, well, these conversations are more difficult than others. What do I do? When someone does this and I get triggered, what do I do? There's something really tough for me to prepare for. What do I do and how do I get ready for it? And my 5 leadership principles are integrity, accountability, courage, passion, and humility. So I decided to create a webinar called Courageous Conversations. And as we go through it, you'll see that there's a lot of opportunity for us to be a victim in a conversation or prepare as an owner for a conversation. And so what I ask you today is ask yourself, are you a victim in conversation and communication, or do you want to be an owner? And I believe that at the end of this webinar, you'll have not only 1, but 4 or 5 different tools to help you prepare not only to be a better communicator, but to have courageous conversations. So let's jump in and see how this is going to go today. Some of the things you're going to take away with is the courage, the curiosity, productivity, and leadership. And I'm often asked, what does conversation have to do with being courageous? And as I just alluded to, you can be fearful of it, you can be excited about it, or you can be courageous. And if you think about all the tough things that you've done in your life, or you were able to do in your life, I believe you would agree or admit to whoever's having the conversation with you, and let's just say it's just you, don't you believe you had to muster up a little courage? And that's not saying that you aren't going to be afraid. It simply means that you are going to have courage to attempt something. So you'll get some of that out of today. Curiosity, if anyone follows me on LinkedIn or Instagram, you know I just posted a fantastic article on curiosity. In fact, it was inspired by a client of mine last week when I was working with her group. But I would tell you that being curious and having intention around your conversations is a critical factor to being courageous in your conversations. Productivity, what does this have to do with being productive? Well, imagine if you're avoiding conversations and you're not having them, or you're showing up weak in the conversations and not as an owner, as we alluded to earlier, you're not going to get anything done. And if you are, you're going to get things done by wasting time and energy. And I would say to the business owners out there, you're also wasting money. When your people cannot communicate, when your employees and your leaders cannot communicate effectively, then you're wasting time. And as you know, time translates to money. And then it's without judgment. You're looking at a man who had to let go of judgment many, many times in his life to be a better communicator. And I believe that when you do stop judging other people, you see them for who they are, and you're able to communicate with them more positively. So all of this is tying together. And as my website says, and on the screen there, if you're seeing it, it's Aden Leadership. The reason I got into this was to help leaders become better leaders, help them communicate with their followers as effectively as they possibly can. And frankly, as a parent, which I am as well, communicate with the 2 or 3 or 4 most important people in your life outside of your spouse, if you happen to have one. So let's jump in. I hope you'll enjoy what we have in store for you. So does any of this sound like you? Does any of this sound like things that will help you? And what would you do if you had the tools? Would you use them? So take a look at this picture and ask yourself, what's the first thing that comes into your mind? Could be you on the left, could be you on the right. They're either pretending to communicate, don't know each other, forced to share a table, or just preparing to have a difficult or a courageous conversation. I don't know. I'm not saying you have conversations like this, but I bet you a dime to a donut that when you've walked into a coffee shop or a restaurant, a loving couple, a family with kids, or somebody who has said, let's meet and communicate, this is kind of how it ends up at times. So do you procrastinate? Do you put things off? Now, I'm not asking about your chores or your honeydews or your big lists for work. I'm talking about, do you procrastinate about having conversations that you know need to be had in order to, and that list is on and on and on, in order to have a better relationship, in order to get a project started or a project completed, or to communicate with someone who's holding up the timelines of a project. You can see the applications are deep in this webinar. Would you communicate better to support your relationships? Would more communication be important to your relationships? And ask yourself this one. The last time I wanted to really say something to him or her, I didn't, I couldn't, I won't. I walked away, I held it in. So sometimes more is better. All I'm trying to help you today is to get better prepared for those more. And then oftentimes, do you delegate the conversation? Do you recognize then this is better off if someone else does it? You mean communicate on your behalf because you don't have the courage or the tools to do it? So let's continue. The real challenge is if we don't have these conversations, if we don't prepare to be courageous in our communication and we don't take our relationship serious, people will leave you. You will leave them. You'll come up with all sorts of reasons why you shouldn't have this or you couldn't do that, all because you didn't want to have a positive or a courageous conversation with someone. And if you look yourself in the mirror right now, if you're anywhere close to one, ask yourself, have you ever done this? And I guarantee you, you have. So the real challenge is, how do you stop? How do you stop behaving like someone that's a victim? How do you stop behaving like someone that doesn't care about the person they're getting ready to speak to? And how about if you did care and you wanted to show that person and you had some intention around your conversation? Once you make the shifts, and we're going to go through those, I'm going to go through those with you. Sometimes I think there's someone with me and there isn't. It's just me today. Once you make these shifts, here are some things that you can almost be guaranteed to have. And if you get 2 or 3 of these today, then congratulations. But after you start working on them, I almost guarantee you, you will receive all of them. You'll have more confidence. You'll create more agreements. And by that, I mean agreement between 2 human beings about what will be done and when, instead of expectations. Although that's a whole nother webinar. Improved relationships, we've touched on that already. Easier conflict resolution. When something's not going well, it's a conflict. If you're not doing something for somebody or with someone, there's a conflict. I'm in the middle of helping my elderly parents from Southern Arizona move to Denver. Just being there this weekend, helping them pack, was full of conflict. Several times I had to lean in and say, seriously, do we need all of this? Are you sure you want to pack all this and move it, only to not look at it for another 20 years? That's easy, but at the same time, if I don't say anything, then I watch 2 people I love struggle. Then there's the siblings here in Denver, one in Albuquerque. Who's going to do what and when? How much are people going to pay? How much time are people going to put in? How do we communicate about what's best for all of our parents or both of our parents as siblings? One doesn't care, just wants to pitch in and do this and that's it. And the rest of us are left to communicate about what really needs to be done and when. This takes courageous conversation just to communicate with your siblings about moving your parents from one place to another. Sounds easy, but it isn't. It happens to us all the time. Higher productivity. Part of what I do as a leadership coach and a business consultant is I help companies become more productive, perform at a higher level, whether it's sales training or better leaders or better communication, helping followers understand what leaders are saying. The number one output of a company is to be productive, to produce something so somebody else can buy it, enjoy it, or use it at some price. So to be more profitable, no, I didn't put that up there because I can't guarantee profitability. But by being more courageous with your conversations, I can guarantee you will be more productive. You as a person, you as a team, and you as an organization. If you stop hiding behind conversations that are right out there for you to take, but instead you hide on the cell phone, you hide on the email, and you say something you feel is courageous, but all you've done is make it worse. And I know there's some of you out there going right now, yep, he pegged me. This is exactly what I do. Well, good, you're at the right place. A lot of people ask why. Why did I get into this and who am I? And the picture on the upper left is really my why. Those little guys are my boys. The blondie's Brooks, and the other one with the hat on is Jackson. My ex and I created both of those in about 15 months. I won't bore you with the details other than to say we were adopting the one on the right. We ended up getting pregnant with the one on the right, and we had a 2-for-1. And since then, I have been such a different man, such a different person, and thus started Aden Leadership. Bottom left, or in the southwest corner, is exactly what I like to do. I like to engage with people who are listening and interested in becoming better. Better at what? Better in relationships, better in communication, better leaders. Yes, that's my focus. And I love that engaging and listening. And then the one on the right is simply, I enjoy being in front of people who are interested in some material that I have to deliver. And yes, it excites the heck out of me to serve other human beings. And servant leadership, if you've Googled me or looked at anything that I do, it's all about servant leadership. And to me, that means to serve first and lead second. So let's continue. The 4 shifts I'm going to ask you to make today, ladies and gentlemen, are simply this. Have more empathy. Have more empathy for other human beings in your life, your followers, other leaders, your leader, your spouse, your kids. Think about see their, feel their world through your eyes, and then see it through their eyes and ask them questions. What is it like to be you is what you're really asking. And then find out what you can do for them. And when you do that, you come from a place of empathy and curiosity. Think about it. You're already leaning in. It's easier for you then to ask those difficult questions and have that courageous conversation. Will it take some preparation? Sure. Will it take some practice? Absolutely. So practice having the courageous conversations with the easy people in your life. Could be a lover, could be an older kid, could be a friend. Just practice. And you know what? It's okay to say, hey, Betty, I'm working on something that I learned the other day and I want to try it out on you. Or help me practice for a tough conversation I'm having with somebody else. So think about it in those terms. Language. A lot of times we say the wrong thing with the wrong word, but at the right time. So I'm going to help you with both. But what I want you to consider today is look at your language. How are you showing up? Are you saying, I can, or I will? Just that simple shift. Will you? I don't care what you can do. I want to know what you will do. And I don't mean I don't care about you. I'm saying I'm more interested in the will versus the can. And even then, how I shifted my language from care to interested, to maybe be more or less offensive, I should say. Emotions. This is not going to come from here. I know you're intelligent. I know you're heavily degreed. I know you know what you know to do your job. Congratulations. see this or see that. I'm not impressed by titles, and I never will be. I've had big titles and I've been there. I get it. So again, congratulations for being intelligent. But unless you're emotionally intelligent, unless you bring the E with the I, you're never, ever going to be a good communicator if you care. A lot of people believe they're communicating because all they know is one way. And pointing at someone, telling them what you expect, pointing at someone to tell them how to run your company is not communicating. It's called ruling or managing, and it certainly won't be called leader. Again, probably another seminar or webinar. Listening, and I mean listening with your eyes too. Listen with your eyes too. Look at the person that you're speaking with. Receive them when they're sharing. Get off your phone. Get connected. You cannot and will not have a courageous conversation unless you're present. Confucius say, impossible to be present unless you're present. Simple but powerful. The shift one, as I mentioned, is empathy. And be humble with a desire to engage. Understand the balance between discipline and love. Yes, I put parenting up there. I'll show you what I mean about this in just a minute. But again, to be humble is to live with some humility in your heart. And I ask you, when's the last time or the first time you ate humble pie? When did you realize you weren't the biggest person in the room, the greatest person at all? And you started to recognize that, hey, I've got some work to do. This is a great opportunity to start in a real cool, focused opportunity called Courageous Conversations. This is the opposite of the conversation we saw earlier in the coffee shop. Wherever these two are, you can see this photo and actually believe somebody is interested in receiving somebody else, or somebody is interested in sharing with somebody else. Is this a courageous conversation? Don't know. All I know is they are displaying empathy and interest and curiosity. And this is what I ask you to consider. When you're meeting with people, show up present, show up ready to receive. So back to love and discipline just for a second. On the left, you'll see the vertical axis is discipline, the horizontal axis is love. In a book that was written by John Eads, it's called The 8 Principles of Leadership. And he focuses on the real reason we're here, and that's to elevate others. So in your conversations, if you're focused on elevating with the right amount of discipline, the right amount of love, and you're not showing up with a little of both and saying, I'm going to manage the situation, or I'm going to rule the situation with too much discipline. And certainly you don't want to please people with too much love and not enough discipline, which some of us do as parents, right? We want to do everything for them because we want them to what? Not do anything themselves, not learn how to do anything else. And then support is okay. And in my world, okay is just not good enough. And I want you to focus on elevating other people, and especially yourself. And there it is, just kind of highlighted for you. Focus on that. You'll get more of the relationship. You'll get better at communicating. Shift 2, as we talked about, be aware of the right language and the behavior to build trust in your relationships. And by that, I mean, are you listening to what they're saying? Are you communicating with words that make them feel safe? And if your behavior is such that you're showing up to receive, you're showing up to behave in a way that you're not going to judge, you're going to be a good listener. If you show up with that in your heart, not in your head, but in your heart, you will actually have better relationships. So choose the language that you're going to use with the people that you really care about, and they'll see it, they'll feel it, and dare I say, they'll appreciate you more than you've ever appreciated. And remember, some of this is not going to help you get attaboys. You're not doing this because you're expecting something in return. You're doing this because you want to communicate with someone like you've never communicated before, and pretend it's someone that you care about deeply, or dare I say, someone you love, and see how you show up. So, because sometimes we're so good at communicating with people we know and love, and then when it comes to a coworker or a follower or a leader, we forget everything that we feel inside and we react. And that's what makes these conversation is difficult. This is an ineffective way of communicating. You know this guy, you've seen him somewhere before. It's you. You've been this person, or you've been on the other side of this. Behind this effective questions is another person who's looking at this person and saying to himself, what a you know what? Why is he pointing his finger at me yelling? What is the problem? Why are we behind? And basically all he's saying is, why aren't you good enough? How's that for a courageous conversation? Now, this guy didn't even have to have courage. The guy with the tie staring at us, he didn't even have to have courage to point. This is what he does all the time. What we're training you to do and helping you to do is be more empathetic, person with a tie, but person that you can't see, which could be you in this scenario. How do I help you become more courageous when it's time to say, hey, Ted, this stuff stops now. I'm a human being. I've been here for X amount of years. I've given you no reason not to trust me. Yes, we're behind on this and this. I take full responsibility for my stuff, but this relationship is not working. Now they can let you go, or you can start over and have a relationship with this person if you want to. Now, it may not be your boss or a leader or manager, whatever you call him or her. It might be someone that is just not understanding where it is you want to come from. So what are you going to do? So ask good questions. Ask good questions about the conversation you want to have. Language and behavior. How do we focus on this? Think about when you are so focused on just you. When you're focused on just you and not the other person, then you can be combative. You win, they lose. If you're a little bit focused on both interests and you just avoid the conversation altogether, then you lose and they lose. To the right, if you're all about appeasing them or pleasing them, they win and you lose. And that's not good either. So think about what you can do to not only compromise, which is a little of both, but to go all the way in. Focus on your interest and their interest, and then both parties win. You've probably seen this before, but at the same time, think about what it is if you truly are focused on both sets of interests. And that's what it looks like, similar to the other graph. I'm asking questions without getting a response, but I'm just going to say, do you get this? And if you have questions, put them in the chat and I will get to them as we get to the end of the webinar. Shift 3, understand your emotions by interacting with your inner and outer voice. There's a lot in this little slide, but a lot of us hold things inside. A lot of us have zero filter and it just comes spewing out. And a lot of people are thinking one thing, but say something else. So that doesn't help anybody. What you feel inside and what you want to say, if they're congruent, it makes it easier for you to communicate. But sometimes you have a thought and then you have an emotion, and then before you know it, the conversation's way out of whack because you've just kind of blurted out something that you really shouldn't have said. So let me take a question here. I'm excited. Okay, best verbiage to use when trying to collaborate with someone. How do I start a conversation? Okay, good question. Well, first of all, it depends on who it is, and it also depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish. In my opinion, there's nothing better than to just admit to someone you like to collaborate. Not compete, not avoid, not argue with, but just collaborate. So the best thing I would suggest there is just to say, hey, what would it be like if we worked together? You don't have to use the word collaborate, but work together. And if it's someone you already work together, then you might say, how do we work better together? What would that look like? And again, if you're curious and you're coming from a place of putting both interests on the table, I believe you'd have a better opportunity to communicate and collaborate. So this is typically what it looks like when we are overwhelmed. And at this moment, this person is thinking, I've already got this, and this to do. He or she is not communicating with me very effectively as to what's his or her priorities. I'm talking about perhaps her leader. Or maybe this is the leader and she's looking at her emails and going, oh my God, no one is getting it. Everybody is avoiding me. Everybody's saying they don't have time or they don't have the energy. So what do you do when you have these feelings? Do you let them leak into your conversations? Do you make listening more difficult? Or do they just take a toll on your well-being and you take it home? You start to argue with your spouse. You start to yell at your kids. I don't want to say you kick the dog because that's inhumane. I'm sure no one would ever do that. It's just something that people used to say a long time ago. But at some point, you've got to understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling. And if you're not able to do this, you need to learn how to do it. And what I'm going to share with you next is to just take some time. And I was in a leadership development retreat the other day, and some of the answers were, what would you do? They say, I would just walk away. Or as I like to say, you put your finger up and you just say, hey, I need a minute. But just communicate honestly about what's going on. Because here's what's happened when we get into our mind and we get this toxic waste or these unavailable emotions, and we start to think about what are we going to do? We really have three choices. You can dump it. You can just literally come out with everything you're thinking and you just say it. And in most cases, and you've been around these people, it just pollutes the entire environment. Think about it when you just dump toxic waste. The other option is to hold it inside, which a lot of you do. And I used to as well a few years ago, not anymore. But when you do it, ultimately it has to come out. It has to come out. So it implodes and then it leaks out. Or you can be mature and intelligent enough and emotionally engaged enough to process it, process this toxic waste and create new energy. And how do you do that? You simply do it by understanding, why are you feeling this way? Where are these emotions coming from? It could be because I don't want to be seen. It could be because you're jealous. It could be because you honestly don't know what you're doing and you don't have the courage to ask for help. So there's a lot of things that create feelings for us that are unexplainable. But please take a moment and process them. Get to a quiet space, get to your happy place, whatever you call it, and walk through it with yourself. Why am I? Why am I? How am I? Why is this affecting me the way it is? It sounds silly, but I'm asking you to actually take time processing so you can save time communicating. Does that make sense? And sure, you're out there saying, yes, no, I don't know, can't see you. So I'm going to just believe that you believe me, or believe that you understand. Viktor Frankl, this is a slide that if I had one that I would put on everyone's wall relative to this webinar, would be this. Between stimulus, there is space. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. You get to decide how you're going to respond based on how you've been stimulated. What are you going to say? Who are you going to be? How are you going to show up? Because in this response lies our growth and our happiness. And when he says our growth, he means you, but he also means the relationship. The two people that are not going to just fire back and forth and push people back into a wall. Yes, if your spouses are listening, this is what we do. We're never wrong. They are always wrong. We are always right. Well, BS. We both know. We all know that's not possible. So take a moment and understand, in that space, you have the freedom and the power to choose. Who are you going to be in this conversation? So this helps you in the moment be more courageous by saying, I'm not going to be the person to speak next. And then you might say, I need a moment. And then you come back and now you're prepared to have a courageous conversation. Because a lot of this stuff surprises us. I get that. Not everything is all sketched out. Oh, 10:30, got a courageous conversation. Better prepare for it. But you know in advance which conversations are going to be more difficult. Don't kid yourself. You control your day. You control your time. Shift 4, listen. In my opinion, this is the most difficult shift to make. I know it because I've lived it. I wasn't the best listener in the world at times. I was listening to say what I was going to say next. Sound familiar? I was listening so the next thing I say, they get to understand me because I was the most important person in the room. But now I understand that to listen, to understand where the other person is coming from is more valuable, is more important. And as I mentioned to the team last week, imagine if we're both listening to understand versus being understood. Imagine if we came from a place of heart versus a place of, I told you so. So listen, and I'll repeat it with your eyes too. I cannot overemphasize how important it is to listen with these two. These are good, but these are better because that person knows he or she's being heard. That person knows that they're being received. And also what's going on right now. I'm taking the time to be present. I'm sharing with you, with my body language and my eyes, I'm all yours. I'm here to receive. That makes people feel good. And that gives you the freedom to knock out everything else in your world and say, okay, let's have this conversation. Now, if you're the person that if this is the person that you're preparing for, imagine if they show up that way for you versus, all right, you've got 5 minutes, come in and be courageous. They're never going to say that, but they're going to give you that look. And they're going to be looking all over the place while you're talking or speaking, and you're not going to feel heard, and it's going to be more difficult for you. So you might even ask them, is this a good time? I know we have it on our schedule. I just want to verify it's still a good time. And are you prepared to listen? How would that sound? When's the last time you asked somebody if they are prepared to listen? So make it easy on your colleagues is what I'm trying to say, and be ready to listen, be ready to serve, be ready to receive. Reflective listening, what is being said underneath the words? We don't want people to guess what it is we're trying to say, but at some point, the people that are listening are going to understand what's underneath the words by trying to understand exactly where this other person is coming from. And you, listeners, if you're out there and you're preparing for someone else's conversation with you, give them the opportunity to see you being reflective. And ask questions about them that will help them have an easier time with this conversation. And if you're preparing for one, how are you going to show up as a listener? Even though it's you're the person that has to have the conversation with them, it's something you want, something you need to clear the air with. Imagine if they showed up like ready to listen. So think about that. Dalai Lama said, when you talk, you are only repeating what you already know. But when you listen, you might learn something new. Think about that. If this is always moving and this is not working, and certainly you're not up here, you're just regurgitating what you already know and you're not growing. The whole purpose of this webinar is to help you grow and help you become a better communicator. It's not that difficult. I will tell you, it starts with your heart. It starts with a desire to just lean in. You'll hear that a lot. It might make you sick. It's so repeated. But to lean in means to be engaged. Lean in means to listen with intention. I'm good with it. I don't want you to sit back and look like a know-it-all with your arms closed. Our arms crossed. I want you to lean in and receive. And when you're having that difficult conversation, lean into the person so you invite them to, it's okay. We're not here to fight. We're here to be collaborative. Once you make the changes or once you make the shifts, here are some things that I will repeat as guarantees. You will be more confident. But now I add, you will be more prepared for any conversation. If you stop and think about some of the things we've talked about today, you will be more prepared. And if it's just being more prepared, and it comes from a place of confidence, I will guarantee you this. Anytime you're more prepared, your possibility of winning, your possibility of achieving, your results are going to improve. That is almost irrefutable. And if there's anyone out there in leadership, or as you may call it, management, someone in sales, something, anything to do with productivity or goals or results, which we all are, all, if not, why are you really working? Even if you're out there caring for other people. Sometimes it's difficult even to care for somebody. But the level of care, the level of service, the level of love that you leave that person will increase if you prepare for some of these difficult conversations. You will have created more agreements. And like I like to say is you stop expecting and you start agreeing. Agreement between two people sounds something like this. Will you meet me somewhere at a specific time? Will you meet me at Starbucks at 3:15 or 3:30, whatever it is? And unless they say yes, you may be the only one at Starbucks and you may be the only one that shows up on time. So get comfortable with asking for an agreement, or be comfortable saying, I'm in agreement, are you? Or, it sounds like we have an agreement. Yes? Never assume, never expect, start agreeing. And this is what will happen when you start having more courageous conversations. The conflicts are in your lives, ladies and gentlemen. They exist today. Some of you have things on your to-do list that are basically showing up as a conflict. You either don't know how to do it, you can't do it, you won't do it, or you really don't believe it should even be on your list. You're even conflicted about why you have to do it. So have a conversation, be courageous, and ask someone to prioritize for you. If not, you're going to live in a bowl of misery. You'll show up as a victim, and you'll continue to have conflicts. Do you get the theme here? You get to decide. You get to choose. You get to choose between being confident and being prepared. Do you want to have more agreements? Do you want to tell somebody what to do, or do you want to be told what to do? You get to choose. And some people tell me as I'm coaching them, yeah, you don't understand Mike, or you don't understand Sally, my boss, or my leader, my manager. Typically when they're talking about someone that's a you-know-what, they don't use the phrase leader. They usually say my manager, or worse, my boss. You don't understand my boss. And I lean in and I ask, is your boss in front of me, or are you in front of me? What do you want? What do you want? How do you wish to communicate? I almost can guarantee you that how you decide to show up with them and for them gives them the opportunity to shift. But until you choose you want to be different, good luck with anybody else in your life, much less your boss and your manager. You will improve relationships, and everything I do in my work is about improving relationships. Leaders that can lead better, followers that can follow better, organizations that can work more effectively. Everybody is better off if our relationships are full of trust, full of honor, full of agreement, full of understanding for one another, instead of jealousy and fear and ego and narcissism. These conversations, these courageous conversations, will help you improve your relationships if you want better relationships. Some people say, hey, I've got 4 or 5 people in my life. I'm fine. I don't need all this. I don't need better relationships. You're lying to yourself. There's no one I've met that says, I don't want to have better relationships. You'll be more productive. I believe we've covered that. And you will create peace of mind. And this translates to being happier. This translates to being healthier. This translates to being more, less worried about what's going on before you go to sleep. This will help you sleep better. This will help you wake up more energized, because you're no longer afraid of that conversation, because you've leaned in, you've had it. Now, by the way, these courageous conversations are not going to be filled with rose petals and gumdrops and all the other stuff. This is not a Walt Disney movie. This is you being courageous because you want to. And now you have the tools, or at least you have someone that you can work with to gain the tools. Anything you want or need relative to having a courageous conversation, I wish you would connect with me personally, and we'll walk through any courageous conversation you need to have to prepare for. Or if there's one you've had and it didn't go over so well because you didn't have the tools, you didn't have the mindset, you weren't prepared. I get it. No one's perfect. Well, let's work on that. Let's find out how you can do it better next time. There's a few tools I'm gonna roll through here pretty quickly so we can save time for some questions. But understand communication tools, how to use them, prepare for and overcome any obstacle. So here, let me introduce them to you. First of all, there's the ladder of inference. Then there's focus on people's interests, introduce that to you a little bit. And then there's know your triggers. So we'll introduce these to you briefly, and then we'll take some time for some questions. The ladder of inference basically said there's a reflexive loop. All our beliefs affect the data we select next time. So if you focus on this image in front of you, this big light blue pool in the very bottom is a huge pool of available data. It's available to you, it's available to me, you can Google it. It's just a huge pool of data. But what we do is we select data based on our assumptions, which is a horrible thing to do, and you know what happens when you assume. Then we make conclusions that support our beliefs, and then we take action. So all the reflexive loop, or the ladder of inference, is saying is, and I like to say, your actions are limited at the top, based on your choice to go back and select the same data every time because they support your beliefs. So in short, what happens if you were to stop telling yourself a story that supports what you believe is true? Or basically, you're not willing to grow. Shift your beliefs. Look at the whole pool of data that's available to you, and quit selecting the same every time to make yourself look better, smarter, or frankly, keeping you from growing. If you learn, share it with someone and they will grow. But every time you learn something, you will grow. So in general, that's what this is trying to say. If you want to read this, you can. I'll read it for you. Why are you always so anxious to criticize me? I just think I have a knack for seeing other people's faults. What about your own faults? I have a knack for overlooking them. This is exactly what happens when we decide not to be aware of where other people are coming from. And as a boss or as a leader or as a manager, it's easy for you, and this kind of introduces the word accountability, which is one of the things I love, is people that I work with are fantastic at holding other people accountable, but they suck, or they're not very good at holding themselves accountable. So select bigger pools of data, challenge your beliefs, widen your ladder so you have more opportunities to provide different and better actions with the people that you serve and guide. Know your triggers. There's a lot of things that trigger us, and if we don't know what they are, we get triggered and we respond. We trigger and we respond. Know what triggers you. Understand that everybody gets triggered. And if you look at this slide, it's you walk by something and you know it's going to trigger you, or there's pollen in the air, no matter what, you can't avoid it. You can't, well, yes, you can. You can take something, you cannot go outside as often during these times. You can stay away from the people that trigger you. You can stay away from or avoid conversations that trigger you. Or when somebody says something and it gives you some sort of response, you have a choice. You have a choice to say nothing, say something polite, ask them a question that would challenge or encourage them to have a different viewpoint. Or you can step right in and say, hey, that wasn't nice. I'm triggered now. This is how I'm feeling. And I don't have the time or the energy right now, but I'd like to set up another time to avoid this from happening again. But understand what triggers you. Write them down. What are the 4 or 5 things that trigger you about the 3 or 4 people that are in your life? Pick 5 people, if you will, and just write down a couple. And then you can have a courageous conversation with them and say, hey, this isn't working for me. When you do this, I feel like that. When you do this, I don't want to talk with you anymore. And then that person, they may say, I didn't know. They may say, I did know, and I just don't know how to stop. So you can actually invite them. You can actually help them be better if you care. Is this relationship worth anything to you? Real quick view on focus of interest. There's the issue, then someone's position. An issue is a matter in dispute. The position is the stance one person's taking. And you can even hear it in my word when I say a stance. To me, a stance is like this. I am holding my position on this issue, period. You email back and forth. This is one of those times where here's the issue. Could be the subject line or it could be something else. Most of us aren't very good at changing subject line. That's, again, a whole nother webinar. So we can communicate on our position. We include other people on now this beautiful conversation between two people about an issue and a position. And all we do is remind them where we're coming from. And we involve other people and say, they're going to get it. And I'll be out of the weeds. Someone will support. Or you can understand the true underlying need or concern of this whole issue. And as I mentioned, where are they coming from? Before you fire back a ridiculous long email that only shows you don't have the courage to have a real conversation, before you do that, pick up the phone. Hey, Julie, I understand where you're coming from, I believe, but I also want you to understand where I'm coming from. Would you be interested in having that conversation so we can get off email and quit wasting everybody's time? Regardless of who that person is with you, to you in the organization, do you think for a moment your courage to pick up the phone and ask, let's understand where each of us are coming from on this issue. So I'm offering, I'd like to see where you're coming from, and I want you to see where I'm coming from. How many times or how much time do you believe we'd save if we stopped the noise of the back and forth and said, I want you to see my interest, and I'm very interested in seeing your interests? I know it sounds kind of corny because we don't talk that way. We just want to fire back. We're busy. Boy, we're busy, and don't slow me down with this stuff because I'm going to pound through my list and tell people how important I am and remind people of my positions. And, oh, wait, that's the other person. That's who I used to be. Now I'm the person who cares about other people's interests. And this is kind of what it looks like. Your interest, their interest, focus on this space. Now even this diagram shows there's very little common ground. As you start to work better together, you start to have a lot more common interest because you have a desire and interest to find out where other people are coming from. So with all this courageous conversation, where does this position you? Where does this put you? Just look at this for a second. With courageous conversations, you'll have higher engagement with your people, your family, your spouse, your loved ones. You'll have more clarity. You'll get things. You'll go, wow, I didn't know this was possible. You'll have better listening. And with better listening, in my opinion, comes better conversation. With better conversation comes better relationships. Curiosity, again, if you're interested, I'll share the article. It was written a few days ago. Be curious. Lean in, ask questions that show you're listening, show that you're prepared or you're interested in having this conversation. Because if you're not going to show up as if you care. And then you've wasted a lot of people's time. Quick recap, behave. Behave as a servant leader, be empathetic, be humble, show up with a desire to engage. Be aware. Know what you're saying, know the words you're using, know your body language, understand that it's other people's interest, and build relationships. Be aware of what you're doing, because what you're doing and what you're saying will either build relationships or it will tear them down. Now, if you want to tear one down, I recommend this. I'm going to, as one of my clients said yesterday, I'm going to edit you out of my life. Now, you don't really need to tell them that. But at some point, you need to demonstrate that this relationship isn't working, this friendship isn't serving me, and I'm out. So just decide to be out. Understand your emotions and how you're saying one thing inside. Oh, I'd love to say this, but what comes out is actually weak and doesn't help anybody. And then the other thing is just to listen. Like I said earlier, cannot overemphasize the desire to, or the encourage you to have the desire to listen for where someone else is coming from. And if you do that, then that interest thing is a lot easier to understand. So I'm going to wrap it up here and take some questions. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to take them. I'm going to see if I can Q&A. Don't see any open questions. If there's anybody that has anything they'd like to share, say courageously. I'm kidding. Share it with me now. If not, I will say thank you. I appreciate it. And I remind you just one thing. It's your choice to lean in and have the conversations that you want to have. It's your choice to spend 5 or 10 minutes on a conversation with somebody that you're having. Just thank yous. Oh, here's one. Let me get let's see. What is the best way to turn off your mind and listen to someone? To that, I would say it's just a choice to maybe go into a place before you know this conversation is going to be difficult. I don't really know how to turn off your mind, but what I would ask you to do is turn up your heart. Come from a place of, I want to listen. I want to be there for this person. I want to receive them. And to do that means you're going from here to here. So to you, Deb, I don't know how to turn off a mind. I just know how to engage the heart. One question: how can you be an effective conversation? How can you have an effective conversation when the other party is not receptive or does not have the same tools? I assure you that a lot of people do not have the same tools. And not everybody attends the same webinar. So my suggestion to you, Jennifer, is to ask them to be receptive. As I said earlier, are you ready to receive? Now remember, you've already set the stage for a time and a place, 10 minutes, 15, 25 minutes, whatever you've asked that other person for. So when you show up, let them know you're ready to have this courageous conversation, and are they ready, and are they ready to receive? I appreciate the warm comments about this was good and encouraging. And yes, then that's it. I will say thank you for everyone that's attended today. This is going to be recorded and shown again at 2 o'clock. So if you have colleagues or friends or followers or leaders that you'd like for him or her to see, then just let them know it's available. So again, I appreciate your time, and I wish everyone a beautiful day. Goodbye.